Hey guys, Brett Weiss here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to another episode of Tales from a Retro Gamer. Today I'm going to talk about the infamous Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. It absolutely sucks, but it's so great. I absolutely love this game, and I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. But first, I'm going to tell you why it sucks. As many of you know, it was created by Tod Frye, a great guy who I've met, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. He created this for the Atari 2600. He programmed it under pressure, didn't have a ton of time to create it, and it has a lot of flaws. Let's flash back briefly to my history with Pac-Man, how I discovered the game. So in the fall of 1980, there was a Quickway convenience store near my junior high school where I went. And, being a kid, I loved video games, of course. Many of you know that, I began gaming in '75, and by 1980, a veteran of the video game wars. And the Quickway near our house had Asteroids, Phoenix, and Pac-Man. And I would play those before school, after school, sometimes during school, but don't tell anybody. And I loved Pac-Man. I thought it was great. But I did get slightly burnt out on it, and I'll get to that just in a little bit. So in 1982, boom, Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Now, I loved the arcade version. It was cute. It had great music, cute graphics. It looked pretty much better than just about anything game that had come before it in terms of just cute characters and that kind of thing. Just a really, really delightful game that anybody could play. It was just four direction control, really easy stuff to figure out, real easy to play. It was a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun time playing that at Quickway. Well, in 1982, in March, I began playing Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. And that was, when I first started playing it, it was a severe disappointment. I didn't expect it to be arcade perfect, but I did kind of figured it would be kind of like maybe Super Breakout for the 2600 or Breakout. A relatively close approximation of the arcade counterpart, maybe an impressionistic version of the arcade classic, but not so much. It was really bad. And so later in 1980, I played it even more when my brother-in-law's mother bought Atari 2600s for everyone in her family. So like her daughter, both of her sons, herself, and one of her sons is my brother-in-law, Mike, who I've talked about many times on this channel. And Mike and their family, my sister, my niece and nephew, they got an Atari 2600 later in 1982 after Atari had dropped the price of the 2600 down to $100. She bought one for everybody in their family because it was so cheap at $100. When the 2600 originally came out, it was around $250 way back in 1977. But in late 1982, when the 2600 was competing with ColecoVision, and when they were promoting their Atari 5200, Atari dropped the price to $100. Played a lot of Pac-Man with my brother-in-law and at their house and at Mike's mom's house, and just my friends had it. And I thought I mean, like everyone, I just knew it was just a bad port. But I grew to love it. So let's talk real quick about why it sucked. The theme music is gone. The sound effects are primitive, just awful sounding game. Nothing like the arcade game. The ghosts are flickering. You're being pursued by ghosts, and then when you get a power pellet, you can pursue them, but they're flickering. Really, really rough stuff. The maze design is completely different, and the point system is way down. It's you get 1 point intervals instead of 10. The ghosts don't have distinct personalities, which gives them a little bit more of a random movement, which I'll get to. But they don't have the personalities, or the game's just not cute like the arcade game. It is kind of just a washed out looking, just kind of an ugly game. The dots Pac-Man eats were changed to dashes and renamed video wafers. Some clever naming there. There's only one fruit, and they call it a vitamin because there's not an actual depiction of a fruit on the screen. Let's see. The escape route, the tunnel, that you go out through both sides, they're through the up and down. And obviously, it's a horizontal screen instead of vertical, but I'll give them that because of the dimensions of the TV set. But I absolutely grew to love the game, and I'll tell you why. So when I started playing Pac-Man for the 2600 in 1982, I was actually tired of the arcade version. I loved Miss Pac-Man because it had 4 new mazes instead of just one from Atari, from the original arcade Pac-Man. But I was burnt out on the arcade version of Pac-Man, just tired of it. And but even so, I was taken aback by the Atari 2600 version. I just like, this is just not right. But back in the day, if you had a game, even if it was bad, or if you were at a friend's house and you were going to play a bad game, whether it was bad or not, you darn played it, because there just weren't. You didn't have a big collection of games. There just weren't. You just didn't have that many games, and typically, friends didn't have just a huge library of games. That was very rare, especially in those days. So we played it. We played Pac-Man again and again, and I got to thinking, this game isn't so bad. It is a maze game, and I love that genre. You are going around eating dots like Pac-Man. It's Pac-Man-esque at least, and the ghosts are chasing you. You're chasing them, and sort of bare bones, it is Pac-Man. And I found that it was a very challenging game, and it even has some there's some variations. I believe there's 16 variations, just like for faster ghosts, or you could go faster as Pac-Man. And I found it to be a very challenging game. As a matter of fact, I still break it out every once in a while to play it. Now, I dim the lights a little bit so the flickering isn't so just annoying. If the lights are real bright, maybe you can, and you don't have the best, picture on your TV, it might be even a little difficult to tell, if the ghosts have stopped flickering or whatever. But anyway, dim the lights, the game looks a little better, and it's, play some music, because the sound effects are bad and you don't get the great music from the arcade game. But I found the game to be fun, and I've still, like I said, I still play it sometime. And you really can't do patterns like in the arcade version. They're certainly not the same patterns, and I don't know anybody personally that knows good patterns on the 2600 version, because the ghosts are random, from what I can tell. And so it's a challenging game. Every time you play it, it's different, and I have a lot of fun playing it. And so at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo last year, I met Tod Frye, the creator, the designer, or whatever, of Atari 2600 Pac-Man. And he has a good humor about the situation. He knows it's not an arcade perfect port, or even close to being arcade perfect. He knows Miss Pac-Man later on the 2600 was much more arcade-like, but he's proud of his creation. It sold over 7 million copies, and people tell him they like it. And I'm sure he hears all about the people that don't like it, or why is it, not a great port. But I talked to him about Pac-Man in this bar at the hotel, where me and a bunch of YouTubers and other authors and programmers, just different guests at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, where we were staying. Now, we were so busy, and I was talking to so many different people. I'm disappointed I didn't get my picture made with Tod Frye. I wish I would have. It would be great for this video. But I did talk to him for a few minutes, told him it was an honor to meet him, and that I actually loved playing Atari 2600 Pac-Man. And I told him why. I told him it was because I was completely burnt out on the arcade version of Pac-Man when it had come out, and that I was just so tired of it that Atari 2600 Pac-Man was a new challenge, and that I enjoyed it. And he said he had never heard anyone say that before. He had people tell him they didn't like it, or maybe they did like it, or just they would ask him about, the programming challenges, or, a 4K cartridge and all that stuff. But I was the only person that had ever told him that he could recall that they enjoyed the game because it was so much different than the arcade version, not for any other reason, or, it's a playable game. And I just told him, since I really no longer like Pac-Man, the original, because I was just tired of it, that I really enjoyed Atari 2600 Pac-Man, and I thought that was great that he had never even heard that before. Now, these days, I've gone back to liking the original Pac-Man, and I'll play Pac-Man for the NES with my Advantage controller, because that's a great way to play a very close approximation of Pac-Man for the arcade. It looks really great on the NES, and it plays well, especially with the NES Advantage joystick instead of the control pad. But hey, I still break out that Atari 2600 Pac-Man. Yes, it does suck as a port, but it's a great game. It's a lot of fun. Let me know in the comments, do you get any enjoyment out of Atari 2600 Pac-Man? Do you like the game, or do you hate the game? Are its faults just too big to overcome? Let me know in the comments what you think about that. And, and have you played any of the Pac-Man homebrews? In recent years, there are some versions of Pac-Man for the Atari 2600 that have more memory, and they're these great homebrew games that you can get through Atari Age, and they're just awesome. They look and sound and play a lot more like the arcade version. So let me know in the comments what you think of Atari 2600 Pac-Man. Thank you for watching this episode of Tales from a Retro Gamer. Thank you for liking it. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it. We will talk to you guys later. Peace out. It's a playable game. It's a playable game. It's a playable game.